Hi there, my name is Philip Ideson. I want to welcome you to the Art of Procurement podcast, the podcast that helps you, a forward-thinking procurement professional, position yourself and your team to proactively take advantage of the revolution that's taking place in procurement today. By interviewing industry trailblazers and sharing insights from our own experiences, my team and I pull back the curtain and shine a light on the strategies, tactics, and tools that procurement teams are using to elevate their impact. Hi everybody, welcome to today's Art of Procurement podcast. We're here in Amsterdam at DPW 2024. I'm delighted to be joined by Remko Van Hoek. Remko, thank you very much for joining me. Remko is the Professor of Supply Chain Management at the University of Arkansas, at the Sam Walton College of Business, among many things, I think. And you've been on the podcast before, so
yes, I have.
It's a pleasure for you to join us.
It's nice to do this in person.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Now, the question that I always start things off and ask people, and I may have asked you this before when we did the podcast, but I'm going to ask it again, is did you find procurement or did procurement find you?
It's a little bit of both. We'll go back and see if my answer's changed, but I found supply chain.
Yeah.
And if you find supply chain, you quickly figure out that procurement is the secret behind the supply chain. And then procurement chose to adopt me and let me major in it. And so here we are.
And you've had a number of roles in procurement leadership roles. You've worked in consulting, you're in academia. So there are few who have had such a 360 view of the procurement profession, I think, as you've had.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm blessed by having had the opportunity to learn from a lot of great people and to learn with a lot of great people too. So it's been fun. What's even more exciting, we've got far to go.
Now, we're coming together today to talk about a survey and the results of the survey, and I think we may dig off into a few tangents from some of those results that you have performed with the team at DPW.
That's correct.
Really trying to understand, what does 10x procurement actually mean? And can we start to put some logic and framework, I think, behind the idea of 10x and take it from the theory to the practice. Before we go into what the survey told us, could you talk a little bit about kind of the methodology of the survey and who you reached out to, who are the kind of respondents?
Absolutely. We were very excited to do this kind of as an experiment, but to really resonate with well over 200 respondents, who many of them came from the DPW ecosystem, if you like, but quite frankly, I shared it with a lot of my friends as well. So it became a healthy mix of practitioners around the world in a multitude of industries. I think what was unique is that we intentionally chose to not only ask procurement executives, but also to ask for the input of the solution providers.
Yeah.
So what's kind of unique is that we have a healthy share of the respondents that come from the solution environment, giving us a chance to compare and contrast and to reveal some gaps, if you like.
So what were the gaps then?
One of the biggest ones, which I think is very interesting, is that we asked the solution providers for what advice do you have to procurement managers that would like to implement your technology?
Yeah.
What are the skills required? What would you advise them on? And then we asked the same question in a different way of the procurement managers. We asked the procurement managers, how would you evaluate the skills available on your team?
Yeah.
And when you contrast them, you find a gap. And the gap is not in being a good buyer, right? You need to be a good buyer. You need to be able to negotiate. You need to understand procurement. We know that. The solution providers know that. But we have that. We're on par. We've got that. Where the gap is that solution providers are advising procurement managers to develop much more of a change management mentality, a change management skill set, to improve the digital savvy, the openness to AI, and some of those things. And that's where procurement managers see greater potential to develop. So that's where there is a gap. So it's actually not about being a better buyer. It's about something else.
Do you find that the procurement leaders have a good vision of what a digitally literate procurement professional looks like, or there's still a little bit of, we're not really sure what that means? We kind of understand in theory, but not necessarily practice.
I think the advice from the solution providers is very solid. When I do work with and research and learn from some of the providers, they will say that sometimes we as procurement practitioners tend to get excited about the shiny new thing, and then we start looking for, well, where can we deploy it? And it's the wrong way around. It's around, what problem can this help me solve, whether it's shiny or not?
Yeah.
And so it's actually not about the technology, it's about the problem. And so the other thing that we found is that, when you start unpacking change management, procurement managers are giving their digital roadmap a pretty solid score.
Yeah.
So we have a pretty good sense of where we need to look at possible opportunities to automate and to enhance capabilities. But knowing how to get there is a different thing.
Yeah.
So without that change management and with that ability to evaluate technologies, to think through use cases and to think through how might I deploy that well, how might I be able to bring my team along, you know where you want to go, but not how you're going to get there.
Right. And there's kind of that gap, the inspiration to action gap, if you will, of I can build kind of the vision, but
and
not necessarily what the roadmap looks like.
And I didn't fully answer your question earlier because you asked me, well, how tech savvy do you need to be? And the answer is, it's not about the technology. The technology is the easy part, right? That's the easy part. It's about, can you understand what the technology might be able to do to you, and can you connect that to, real world problems and think through how you can combine them. For that, you do need to have openness to technology, and you need to have a little bit of an ability to understand and unpack it. But you don't need to code. You don't need to implement it and integrate it yourself.
I think that curiosity and openness is almost the biggest inhibitor at the moment, because the fear factor the fear of the unknown comes in, and that's no different. I've talked on the podcast before about the fear existed when we started to outsource procurement, because it was again the fear of the unknown and what's going to happen to my job, and almost technology is just outsourcing version 2, you're just outsourcing some of the things to technology versus another person. But the change management process is the same, that it's the fear of the unknown and what's that going to mean for me and what's left. And that drives some of, saying closed-minded is too strong, but it's the lack of openness of how do I think about this in a positive way than a negative way.
And you in particular with AI, you get the discussion of, is the bot going to replace the buyer? And that's too unnuanced a question to ask. I actually think the bot will replace the buyer that doesn't embrace the bot.
Right?
Yep. Try to ban the bot, and you will be automated away. Embrace the bot and move forward.
And you will be in very high demand if you are able to embrace the bot and to have that.
Absolutely.
Bring a lot of efficiencies and improvements through it.
I love the point you just brought up. I was meeting up with one of my friends who we featured in one of our articles about digital procurement before, and he shared with me that he's been seeing candidates for openings in his organization come through the door, referencing that article about his organization and saying, that found it so cool, I wanted to come and apply for a job here. I'm like, well, wait a minute. You better have a good digital answer if you want to compete in the scarce talent market.
It becomes a driver or not.
And so
talent.
Don't be fooled by the shiny new thing, but definitely use the shiny new thing to get talent through the door, right? It's kind of like making procurement fun again.
Well, we've taught a lot of the sessions, I've facilitated some sessions here as well, where the theme is about 10x and this exponential growth.
Yes.
What do you feel exponential growth actually is in practice?
So I think we need to talk about the 4S framework. You think of the impact and the ROI of procurement, and the S is our size, and that's just how much ROI. But it's not only size, it's also scope. And so we're really good at driving savings and productivity, but we're doing more and more. Resilience, sustainability, innovation, revenue enablement. So the scope of our impact is growing. The spectrum of our impact is important. For a long time we've played the game of, well, we manage this category, but not that. We have that spend that's influenceable, but that's not. This spend is in compliance, that's not. All right, that should go away. We should be sweeping through the enterprise, through the supply chain and the ecosystem. And finally, the fourth S is scale. And scale combines a couple things: speed, adaptation, experimentation. Those are things that we are not always historically known for, but we need to get known for it, because that's how you innovate forward.
Do you feel that, because you talked about we are trying to get lots of categories under management and
Yes.
the amount of spend that we've done ourselves a disservice by focusing on spend under management as a metric. And it's almost would think about spend under influence, or it's not about us managing something, it's about us understanding how that spend is being bought, but we're not actually having to do it. But we're so focused on the control and the management element of it that's one of the reasons why we've actually pushed a lot of stakeholders away by trying to say,
that's correct.
We want to put ourselves...
Well, and like spend compliance is just the worst possible term, because it makes you sound like you're police. Right. And if you're not in compliance, they're going to tell you how much of the company's money you wasted, right? For me, spend compliance is a quality indicator. If it's low, then your strategy was wrong, or you didn't involve the right stakeholders, or you found the wrong supplier, or you didn't help the supplier. So it's not feedback on the business, it's feedback on procurement. And so compliance should be very high. The other thing there's several constructs part of the 10x thinking. One of them is dashboards.
Right.
And since you brought up spend management, I love spend data. It's so important to be a buyer that leads with intelligence when you go talk to a stakeholder in the business. And it's so fun to be eye-opening about, did you know that your colleague buys from the same supplier with completely different terms and you're fighting over the same scarce resource, And so I love spend analysis. But historically, that's been pulling rear view mirror AP data, crunching it in a spreadsheet for a long time, and going in with a pie chart.
Yep.
Right? 10x movement talks about dashboards that are real time, right? So do you have a control tower where you can see the POs flowing through right now? Can you tell me how much we spent last year, how much are we spending today?
Right.
You know what I mean? And so now it's getting pretty cool.
So what are some of the fundamentals that you feel an organization has to have in place as kind of the platform to enable a 10x kind of growth in the impact that procurement has?
The study was about 10x and a benchmark on procurement digitization, right? And I do think of it in that way. I think of technology can enable us on a path towards the 4S framework. And what we found, we did find a correlation. What's exciting is that the plans that the participants report for digitization are impressive, to say the least.
Yeah.
So 50-60% jump forward, depending upon where and which procurement process you look at. And it's not just a leap forward, it's a transformative leap.
Right.
So up to this point, we've majored in purchase to pay, in data, in the operational basics. Makes a ton of sense, right? Less time on the PO, less time on the spreadsheet. We've done all of that for all the right reasons. Easy to use, catalogs. We've done it for all the right reasons. We're not done with it, but it's not future-proof.
Right.
So the transformative element of the leap is that we are now going to really double down when you look at the plans on strategic sourcing and supplier relationship management, and AI is going to play a big role in it. I think about it as this year is kind of the year of who and what AI.
Yeah.
Next year is going to be IAI.
Yeah.
So across the entire stack that we looked at, AI came in lowest.
Right.
Only 1 in 5 can report that they've started to adopt, maybe have adopted, maybe have scaled. Yeah. Only 1 in 5, right? The rest are kind of thinking about it, use case, maybe a pilot, who and what AI, right?
And I'm not surprised by the typical, there is a gap certainly between the leaders and the followers in a procurement space, and you could argue that gap is getting wider. And that's one of the challenges that we have as a profession, is making sure that gap doesn't get too wide and the followers do follow the examples that the leaders are setting.
I love the research that we do, which does two things. It looks at learning from those leaders that are willing to share. Obviously, it's good for them because they get better candidates applying for their jobs. It's great for their brand. It's great for their position in the internal stakeholder market. But more importantly, most of them will say they do it because they also care for helping the profession progress. And learning from those leaders can help us, capture what we call action principles that those that are not quite as far can then benefit from in leaping forward. Love doing that. That's component number one. Component number two is helping companies that are thinking through, well, where do I place that bet, and how do I think about mindfully adopting and coaching them through and helping them think through that, and learning a little bit along the way. And that's so much fun to do, and there's such an opportunity to do more, and we've got so far to go. It's really, really cool.
You talk about kind of AI, of course, being a driver, and that there's relatively low adoption right now,
Yes.
and it's going to be interesting now that's baselined, how that kind of increases year on year. Procurement has not been a profession that's been known to change quickly. Are we going to be forced to change quickly, do you think, or is there going to be we can see the potential, but it's not going to affect us as quickly as it may if we were faster to embrace new technologies?
So I think on the AI part, let the plans that the respondents report and share with us speak for themselves. 187% increase in companies that plan to be adopting, rolling out, scaling just a year and a half from now. So that leads to the statement, procurement is slated to look very, very different next time we see each other in Amsterdam.
Is there or will there be a singular procurement operating model that's fueled by AI, or is it going to look very different company to company?
Part of what will keep us in business and what will keep this fun is I truly believe there's no universal solution in procurement. There are lots of practices and tools and techniques that are very transferable, but there's no universal solution. Therein resides, is it called the art of procurement?
Yep.
Therein is where it resides. Know the tools, understand the techniques, and figure out how to deploy them to solve a specific business problem. And that's why the job of a buyer is every day is exciting, every day is different, and it requires really good business people to be able to get that right. I've worked in decentralized organizations, I've worked in centralized, I've worked in centralized, and I've worked in everything in between. I've reported to COO, I've reported to CEO, CFO, Chief Supply Chain Officer, country director. All can work. All can work if you can get it to work.
I think we've talked at this event as well about not focusing, like where we had challenges as a profession is we tried to standardize everything. And perhaps,
Correct.
Kind of the 2010s was about standardizing the procurement process.
Correct.
And having a one size fits all. And anybody who said that, my company is different was like, well, that's because you're afraid of change. And actually, now it's all about very unique, specific, targeted, a different model for every single individual company.
Yep.
Help us then be able to enable, use the kind of 10x thinking, but also the frameworks that come out of it. Because what's 10x to one company isn't 10x to another company.
I love what you just said. I think it's actually very, very insightful. I can think back to several people that I've worked with or tried to work with that went around saying we're different, but everybody's different.
Yeah.
But if you use we're different as an excuse to distinguish yourself from something that might be helpful, that's when you put yourself behind. And that's where I lose interest.
Use it as an excuse.
It is an excuse. Yeah, exactly. We're different. Well, that doesn't excuse you from needing to think. No, and the focus on stable processes, we did that for a good reason, because we were trying to get the operational stuff and the administrative stuff. We tried to get that organized and seamless so that we didn't have to bother with it so much anymore. But we know how to do that.
Right.
And so the really cool, innovative and experimental stuff, don't try to standardize it. Let 1,000 flowers bloom.
Do you see, when you look at the difference between those who are kind of leaders, as you surveyed them, versus the rest, when you look at tech roadmaps, that there's certain technologies that are on the roadmaps of the leaders versus those who are perhaps, followers or trying to play catch up?
Well, I mentioned to 1 in 5 when it comes to AI, I instantly go towards, I want to talk to the 1 in 5.
Yeah.
Because they're doing something that the other 4 out of 5 might be able to learn from in the good and the bad way, right? Because leaders also fail. They also try things that don't work, right? So, they may not want to, publish it, right? Because we like to talk about our success stories more than our failures. and that's okay. We can still learn from it. And the other thing also is that, with the focus on standardizing processes, that also came with, technology was expensive. It was a big bet. We're putting a big fat platform in that everybody's going to use. Everybody needs the same training. You can't be onboarded without having done the training. Remember all those things?
Oh yeah, and they would take months and months and months and cost hundreds of thousands of dollars plus.
I still haven't found a person other than the one that said that they're different that loves it.
And then
right?
you waited. You used it once, and then you had to go back 3 months later and take the training again if you wanted to use it again.
Yeah, exactly. And then you get to we're making the budget holder sign off. It's like, no, they're giving your login to their PA and they're clickety clacking through all day. Your process is very robust. You got this, right? Your controls are wonderful. So those were heavy lifts. Those were expensive on all fronts: the technology, the implementation, all of that. Some of the newer technology, it doesn't have to be expensive to get started. It is not hard to start experimenting and to begin to learn. You do not need to have a massive budget or, a major business case review. There's nothing excusing you from trying something if you want to lead and if you dare to lead and if you're not afraid of once in a while failing and learning from it.
So what kind of advice would you give to a procurement leader who's thinking about their vision for the future of procurement in their organization and has heard us talk about 10x and the exponential thinking and the different technologies that may be available? How do you start to think? Because I think one of the inhibitors to thinking about 10x is mindset, and that we've always operated within these walls, these four walls, and you have to think outside of those four walls.
Correct.
Is there any concrete advice you can give to somebody who's going on that journey to think about what can procurement be that looks very different than what procurement is today?
See, and I think the reason why procurement is, based upon its DNA, well positioned to get to a 10x kind of operating model is that we spend time selling every day. We spend time engaging our stakeholders. We spend time selling our suppliers on why they need to engage in our process, why they should think of us as a customer of choice. We are, by definition, we're ecosystem all day long. We connect critical dots in the supply chain all day long. And we're to unlock to so many of the problems that businesses face. You heard Paul Pullman talk about, if you want to get serious about sustainability, there's no way you can do it without procurement. Right? There's no way we can do it. So the time is bright. The bar is going up. We better get moving. And that's probably the main piece of advice. Don't say we're different. Say we're different. We might be really unique. Let's go try and figure it out. Let's go lean in. And in the process, it's not about the technology. I was talking to my friends from Pactum, and I give them credit for, they don't start with the technology. They start with the procurement problem that many companies wrestle with and how you might be able to resolve it and how they've thrown science at it, which they then happen to put into a bit of code. Yep. Right? And so, their technology is really cool, but it's not about the shiny new thing, and it's not what they would lead with, right? So don't fall for the shiny thing. And also don't think there's anything out of the box, because if that was the case, we didn't need buyers.
Yes, and also I think that goes into the theme of being unique is when you think about competitive advantage, it's how do you use all these tools at your disposal to operate in a way that's different than your competitors on the things that only you and your competitors buy.
Correct.
And that we won't achieve, we'll just commoditize what we do if everybody does the same thing.
Yep. You may know I host the CSCMP Supply Chain Hall of Fame at the university, and we just wrote a book about 5 Hall of Famers, and we called it The Making of the Supply Chain.
Right.
And Henry Ford is one of them. And it's not a history book. It's about what can we learn from the past that can help make the future better. One of the things that we discovered was that in 1926, Henry Ford said, "We don't keep a list of things that go wrong. Because if you do, you're going to run out of things to try very soon."
Interesting.
I'm like, wow. Yeah. Wow, that's a good lesson. That's a good lesson.
So it's about time to wrap up, but my one last question is, if you run the survey again next year, and I don't know what the plans are in terms of building on the first survey that you do, but you run the survey again next year, what would you hope that it would tell you versus where we are today?
I think we've got very bold plans, and I'm very excited about that. And I think, DPW is providing a great forum to learn from each other, to learn together, to discover, to see how exciting it is. Remember, 5-10 years ago, there weren't this many startups in our field.
It's exploded, hasn't it?
It is exploding. And so, obviously, many of them are not going to make it. Yeah. But there is so much happening, so don't miss out. And so I would love to come back next year to be able to see, well, what did we learn as we tried to execute the plans? How far did we get? And maybe we don't get to 50%. Maybe we get to 25%. What did we learn in the process? And where are we going to go from here on out? Because, we're going to make a transformative leap. It may be in a year. It may be in 3 years. It's going to happen. Yeah. So let's continue to learn together.
Start experimenting.
Exactly.
So Remko, I want to thank you so much for joining. It's been a pleasure. And, I'm sure that we'll find another reason to do a third podcast.
I can already put on my credentials that I've been here twice. So I'll take it. Look forward to number 3. Thank you.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you, Remko. If this episode struck a chord with you, please do send it to somebody. We grow here at Art of Procurement through word of mouth, and that would be really appreciated. You can also support us by giving us a thumbs up, a star rating, or a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Since 2015, we've built the world's largest free resource for procurement professionals looking to elevate their impact. Our resources span podcasts like this, videos, blog posts, papers, and events. To join us on the inside and to ensure you never miss an episode, a webinar, event, or a post, please do subscribe to our weekly newsletter, This Week in Procurement. You can do that at artofprocurement.com/subscribe. That's artofprocurement.com/subscribe. Thank you for joining us today, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.